What is the brain-gut connection exactly?
Yeah. So I always ask families, especially when the parents come in, I always say, you know how people say, I had a gut feeling? You hear that?
Uh-huh,
Or I feel
uh-huh,
butterflies,
uh-huh.
those type of things. It's truly not just a figure of speech, right? So your gut and your brain are in like constant conversations with each other through the brain gut axis.
Welcome to Journey to Joy Live, a podcast to promote wellness, resilience, and inspire joy. Be empowered to balance your mental, physical, financial, aspirational, and social health while providing mental health awareness and breaking down the stigma of mental illness in the Black community. I'm your host, Dr. If Joy, and I'm here to help you transform life's challenges into opportunities for joy. Let's begin the journey together. Hello, everyone. We're in episode 111. You are what you digest. Microbiome, mind, and mood. And I have joining me today Dr. Derica N. She's a pediatric gastroenterologist. How you doing?
Hello, hello. I'm doing well.
Thank you for being here.
Of
So tell
course.
us more about who you are and what you do.
So yes, so I am, like she said, I'm Dr. Derica Sams. I am a pediatric gastroenterologist, which means that I treat illnesses anywhere. I always say from the mouth to the anus. So
Wow.
basically, what that means, the things that you eat, pain that you may be having in your belly, what your stools look like or your poop looks like, as well as understanding the connection between the brain and the gut.
Oh, yeah. We're going to talk a lot about that because there's definitely a big connection between the two. So, how did you get into this? How did GI docs just say, hey, I want to go into talking about poop all day long?
Listen, okay, so I knew that I wanted to. So when I was starting out, I knew patient population wise, I wanted to do
Mhm.
pediatrics. But within pediatrics, I enjoyed like everything, right? I was like, I don't know what I want to do. Initially, I wanted to be like a hospitalist. And I was like, I think I'm going to do hospitalist work.
Yeah.
But then I felt like with hospitalists, again, no shade to hospitalists, but I felt like they were consulting everyone. And then, you kind of got to
Mm.
respectfully wait for the experts to like, get back at you. And I was like, I want to be one of those experts. So I was like, okay, so I need to be a subspecialist. And I was on a rotation for GI, and immediately it connected to me because it was like I was able to still do everything. Like your gut, it's so connected to every other organ system in your body. And so it was still, I got that feel of being able to do everything, but still the specialty, and subspecialize. So that's kind of how it was, just going through residency and figuring out what defined me the most.
Ah, that's so awesome. It sounds like you're super passionate about it. And you have your own private practice, right?
Yes, yes, yes. So I own Pediatric Digestive Health and Wellness. I am here in Georgia, particularly, real specifically Metro Atlanta, so in Loganville, Georgia.
Hmm.
And we have been open for 6 months now, so it's been exciting. And I do all pediatric gastroenterology and
Wow.
hepatology, specifically looking at fatty liver disease as well.
Liver. Yeah. So you said we. So it's a group practice?
Nope, it's just me. When I say we, meaning my team, I put them in there because they really kinda help, make sure
Okay.
things
Fill
are
out
are
your team.
flowing and moving the way in which they should, so, yeah.
That's dope. And so I imagine you have to see your patients in person or do you have some
Uh-huh.
remote patients?
So I would say 95% is gonna be in
Yeah.
office that I'm
Yeah.
seeing my patients, and then some quick follow-ups or things like that I might do, online, and then I also do, pediatric obesity medicine and family medicine, obesity health, and so for some of those, follow-ups when I'm doing kinda some check-ins, those are telehealth.
Ah, okay. Because I mean, it's not a stupid question because I spoke with an OB-GYN who does everything purely telehealth. I'm like,
How
OB-GYN?
do you
No, it's a
No,
particular
that's
subset
fair,
that she
that's fair.
does, right? So
You're right. That is
but
fair.
yeah. Awesome, and you accept all insurances or is there anything?
Yes, so I accept, all insurances. Mhm.
Awesome. Okay, well, you can find her at pediatricgihealth.com.
Yes, you can.
And same with the, socials. So, let's jump right into it. We're talking about how 'cause you mentioned microbiome,
Mhm.
and it affects our mind and mood, and I always hear about the brain-gut connection, the brain-gut axis, and I know very well how it's connected, and a lot of people, talk about, like, "You are what you eat, you are what you digest." you feel the itis when you eat too heavy or you feel
Uh-huh.
good when you eat healthy. So it clearly is connected to your mental health, connected to your joy. And of course, if you feel stressful, you turn to food and because food makes you feel well. So there's definitely a nice, good connection there. But can I hear you explain as the GI doctor, what is the brain gut connection exactly?
Yeah, so I always ask families, especially when the parents come in, I always say, "You know how people say, 'I had a gut feeling?'" You hear that?
Uh-huh.
Or, "I feel
Uh-huh.
butterflies,"
Uh-huh.
those type of things. It's truly not just a figure of speech, right? So your gut and your brain are in, like, constant conversations with each other through the brain-gut axis. So it's basically like a two-way highway. Think of it like a super highway of, like, nerve signals, hormones, immune messengers, and, like, the main phone line is your vagus nerve,
Mhm.
right? And so when one side is upset, it's telling the other side, "I'm upset with you." And so if your gut is inflamed, your brain is stressed, and so the other sides feel it. And so I kinda think of it that way, that, like, there's this beautiful pathway that's offshoot of every other connection of
Mhm.
just the brain and the gut kinda talking to each other.
Yeah, and if you think about it, like kids who might be depressed or anxious, they normally feel it in their belly, they have stomach aches or school
Uh-huh,
avoidance, they get stomach aches. And I know for me, if I have like a huge test, like the boards or something, I
uh-huh.
feel it. I am using that bathroom before the
Yeah, it's
test.
true.
It's crazy.
Mhm,
Yeah, so it's definitely a good connection. And then, of course, the medications I prescribe, right? So the antidepressants, I'm always talking to my patients about how we have serotonin receptors in our brain, and they're also in our stomach, and those medications can cause upset stomach. So there's definitely a connection there as well.
correct.
Yeah. So if we're going to talk about microbiome, especially for people who don't know what it is. I mean, what is microbiome exactly, and why should we care about it?
Perfect. So, okay. So I always do this. I'm a very visual person because I work in pediatrics. And so I'm
Yeah.
always trying to put it together where to make everyone understand it. So I
Mhm.
think about it, right, of this like community of trillions, truly trillions of bacteria, fungi, and like other microbes. And so they all live together. And that's within itself is the microbiome. But it's
Mm.
kind of like they run together in teamwork. So the microbes that you have here, right, with the
Yeah.
bacteria and things, they help you digest your food, right? They also can train your immune system, and they even help you produce those brain chemicals like you were talking about, like with serotonin, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so when you have a healthy, diverse microbiome, or essentially this bacteria, fungi, and other microbes, then, you have a stronger immune system, you got better digestion, and we talked about even better mood, right? And so also the inverse is also true, right? So when it's out of balance, we call that dysbiosis. And so that can trigger inflammation. You'll have digestion problems and kind of more we'll talk a little bit more about it, the mental health challenges that you can have associated.
Gotcha. And did you say when they're not balanced? Is that what you said? They
Yeah,
can
so when they're out of balance, dysbiosis, then yeah, you can start to see a lot of other problems with your digestion, also inflammation,
yeah.
and kind of mental health things as well.
And what would make them not balanced?
So I think definitely food wise. So if we're trying to think about what are some things in terms of food, so one, the types of food that you're putting in is going to be a big thing. And then stress as well plays a big role in what makes them kind of out of balance, would be those kind of the main medication, as you mentioned,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
your
for sure.
medication can make them, and illnesses, right? So you can get an illness, particularly, say, for instance, you did get like a gastroenteritis, so a stomach bug, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And that can kinda throw things out of balance, right? And so it can alter your microbes. And my younger kiddos, when I think about them, they're the kiddos that, may have a lot of ear infections, and so they're getting a lot of antibiotics. So again, the medication's changing and altering those things as well.
Gotcha. So, there's this talk about probiotics, taking those, and how does that affect the balance, of the microbiome too?
Yeah, so when you're thinking about probiotics, okay, I always say they're not all created equal. There's a lot of them out there that doesn't really necessarily have research behind them, right? And
Mhm.
a lot of them aren't regulated. So in my office, the one that I particularly like to use is called Visbiome. I actually have a little thing about it.
Okay.
So
I see
Visbiome, I
that.
really like a lot because they work. There's a lot of research. And for me, when I'm looking for things to recommend, it's
Mhm.
always harder because trying to find things in the pediatric population, right? We shy away from like wanting to do research on our, babies, and so, younger, children, so I totally understand
Right.
it. So it's a lot harder
Yeah.
when we're trying to identify things, so when I find something that, like, the whole family can use and, like, my children can use, it's always exciting. But with, Visbiome, they are active live cultures, so this is what you wanna keep in the refrigerator, and depending upon kinda what symptoms you are experiencing will tell you kinda what your dosage should be. So we
Oh.
have one that's kinda like a mild version, so you may only take a certain amount.
Mhm.
We say like mild IBS, so right, our irritable bowel syndrome, our functional, so that's that
Oh,
brain gut,
yeah.
right, dysfunction. So that one
Oh.
versus if you have severe IBS, and it goes all the way in terms of spectrum-wise that we can
Mhm.
even treat inflammatory bowel disease, right? And so,
With
like, our
probiotics.
true yeah, so looking at particularly with
Mm.
ulcerative colitis, it has been shown to kinda help decrease, inflammation and to keep people kinda their symptoms at bay. So, that's one of the ones, like I said, there's a lot of research behind it, and so it's one that I generally will offer or recommend in my office, in my practice,
I was
for
gonna
the
say
family.
yeah, that
Yeah.
see?
Down the
So
2, H2, so, like, it makes it
probiotics sounds like your fish oil because I prescribe fish oil to basically all of my patients. Like, this will help you with your attention, your
Uh-huh.
depression, your focus, and this, that, and the other. So it sounds like what you do, you basically recommend it to most patients, right?
Yes, 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 yes,
If
I
not
do.
everybody.
And it's also identifying, right? So if you are, having any type of gut issues, one, identifying because you may need to do other things before just incorporating,
Mhm.
your medications or doing the probiotics, but also kinda after you've kinda identified what's the underlying issue, then probiotics are always, helpful, kinda helping
Yeah.
with the especially for pain-wise as well, can be
Yeah.
really helpful for that.
Okay. So how do you know when there's dysbiosis? Like, is there a particular test you do, or should patients look out for particular signs that, like, oh, it may be this
In
versus
terms of
something
perma
else?
so I would say symptom-wise, it's generally kinda what brings you in here, right? So you're gonna
Right.
be thinking about your, belly pain, your aches, right? One other thing is gassiness, right? And then the third thing I would say, your stool. So I usually look at those kinda 3 things as our starters,
Mhm.
right? And so when I say belly pain, it's asking them, "Okay, what symptoms are you experiencing?" Most of the time, it's gonna be those vague, "Oh, it kinda generally hurts all over" type pain that you're
Mhm.
experiencing. When I'm starting to see patients that have very specific, localized pain, then we gotta kinda start to think, is there other things, causing it? But for that generalized, "Okay, my belly just kinda always hurts,"
Mhm.
um in terms of your, like, gassiness, right? These are patients, they're always like, oh, they pass a lot of gas and it is very smelly, right? So that could be a sign,
Gotcha.
right? Are you
Oh,
always
that makes
burping? Things like
sense.
that, is important, right? Because I always say when we pass gas, right, it's not ours really. It's the microbiome, right? So they're helping us break down our food, right? And that's their waste is this gas that they're producing, right? And so when you're passing a lot of gas and it's very
Uh,
smelly, that can lead to signs of, there's something going on from the microbiome standpoint, right? And so
yeah,
that
yeah.
can even lead to what we call like small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. So that's one of those ones where it's that bad
Mm.
that dysbiosis, right? That where you're having a lot of the bad bacteria. And one of those things, that's where you're getting the
Yeah.
belly pain, the gassiness and things. And so we even at this stage, and I do it here in my office, is breath testing where you can literally have someone come in, they blow into a straw, we
Mhm.
collect it in test tubes at different times, right? And I'll give
Mhm.
them a little, drink to taste, and then that kinda brings the bugs out. This is how I explain
Yeah.
it to my patients. They bring the bugs
Okay.
out, and then they come and feast on this juice, and then they, like, produce gas. And so then we have you blow into this, like,
Oh,
test tubes,
you
and we
make
send it
it
off to
fun.
the lab, and the
Mhm.
lab can tell us on average about, whether you're having more of this bad versus good. And so from
Mhm.
there, then we can do a whole gut reset. So that's that one. And then lastly, when I was saying the stools, so I always
Yeah.
ask what stools look like. So when in my office, I use the Bristol stool chart scale, and it's can Google it all over. And so I have them all posted up in the office. And I essentially go through and say, okay, what does your like poop look like, right? Because
Mhm.
that can give us insight. Are we dealing with someone with constipation? So that's your ones and twos that's on the scale, right? Is it
Mhm.
normal, right? And it's coming out nice and soft,
Mhm.
right? And that's your threes and fours. Or are we looking at something that's more like mushy to full watery, right? And so that's your five, six, sevens. And so
Gotcha.
there is a scale to kind of give you some idea of what's going on
Yeah.
and asking your frequency. So you should be pooping, right? Everyone should be pooping every 1 to 2 days. That's soft and easy to pass. And so if you're going 3 and 4 days, or when you do go, it's really hard, or if it's large in volume, then that can also kind of give us some insight about what's going on inside.
That's good. You're really talking about poop all day. I had
That's
a
all I'm doing,
patient
y'all.
I had a patient who, the parent was saying how he passes gas all the time, all day long, and it didn't occur to me that, "Oh, get your microbiome checked,"
Yeah.
basically.
Yep. Totally can.
Poor
And we can check
kiddo.
it.
He was being teased at school for it and everything.
Oh, poor baby.
Yeah. See how it's so connected. So, how can the health of our guts impact our mind and mood? That's what we're talking about. We're on a
Yeah.
mental health podcast, especially when it comes to stress, anxiety, and depression.
Great. So, okay, again, I talk about, I put everything kind of in like in thought. So, 95%, I know you mentioned of serotonin, 95% of it is actually produced in your gut. Right? And we don't think about that.
Wow.
It's not this brain, it's actually, right? It's your other brain. So I always say, I always start out and be like, how many brains do we have? And most people are like, oh, it's one. And I'm like, well, no, it's actually two. Right? So you have your central nervous system,
Mhm,
that's where
mhm.
everyone knows about, but you also have your enteric nervous system, right? And so it has its own kind of, nervous system and its own brain and way it processes. And so when you think about it, you're like 95%.
That's
Right,
a
and for
lot.
everyone out there, serotonin, that's that feel good neurotransmitter, right? That's the one
Mhm.
that makes you feel good. So high serotonin, you feel great. And so your gut actually, you have special cells that line your gut, right? The EC cells, right? I'm gonna get too scientific, but there are cells that line your gut and they rely on amino acids like tryptophan, right? So you can get
Yeah,
those in your
yeah.
like, meats. Particularly people think about it like in your turkeys and stuff like that, but you can get
Yeah,
those in your
exactly.
proteins. And so you get the tryptophan from your diet, and then they give a little nudge from like the healthy gut bacteria, and they
Mhm.
like to make more of it. And so then
Yep,
when you have this, then you're gonna produce more and more serotonin. And so if your gut bacteria are thrown off, you're
yeah.
gonna make less serotonin,
Yeah,
right?
that
If you
makes
don't have
sense.
the right gut bacteria, you're gonna make less serotonin. So if you have less serotonin, then you're going to have, an effect on your mood and your sleep and your overall like emotional resilience, right? You can see that. And there's a lot of research looking into this now because I feel like before it wasn't something that we kind of acknowledged before, but there's a research that came out before where they took women, right? And they had these women eat like probiotic rich yogurt like twice a day. And then
Okay.
they went and they measured the changes in the brain activity. And it showed that for the women that were eating these probiotic rich yogurts, they had measurable changes in the brain activity related to their emotion, which was kind of cool.
So,
And then
a
there's
positive
another
benefit.
one where they wanted to know the flip side of it.
Uh-huh.
Right, and so what they did were they transplanted, like, gut bacteria from people that had diagnosis of depression, and they put it
Mm.
into rats, and then the
Mm.
rats started showing depression-like behaviors, right? And so they're looking at it the
Whoa.
power between that, right? And so looking kinda thinking through that, that's why it's also important to
Wow.
understand and monitor your stress levels.
Wow.
Because stress, right, is actually one of the biggest, like, microbiome disruptors. And so
Mhm.
when you're stressed
Sure.
out, you have your, like, we talk about your hypothalamus, your pituitary, your adrenal, right? All those things, it gets fired up, right? Your HPA axis. And so you start pumping out a lot of cortisol and your
Yep.
adrenaline, right? And from there, your cortisol, right? We always talk about that cortisol, right? It can
Mhm.
weaken your gut. And then, there's this concept about like the leaky gut, but the overall
Yeah.
picture of that is that you have this high amount of cortisol from stress, and then now your gut is going to allow inflammatory molecules to now get into your bloodstream, right? And so one, right? So now we're having that downstream effect. And
Mm-mm.
then overall stress within itself can, slow down beneficial bacteria. And then now you got less helpful microbes to kind of help you, right? And so then this is like this vicious cycle of this gut
Makes
inflammation,
sense.
less serotonin, more anxiety, low
That's
mood.
wild. That's
Kinda.
because I don't even know if I understood that. I'm still on the whole 95% thing
Uh-huh.
because I'm thinking here, like, serotonin's in the brain, that's how it affects the brain, the mood, emotions. So, basically what you're saying that the serotonin travels through the bloodstream to get to the brain to make you feel a certain way, and all everything else
Yes.
does as well as far as the
Yes,
stress
but it's being 95% is being produced in your gut. So that's probably when you say you eat good, you're like, "Oh, I'm doing my happy dance," right?
Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh.
Eating makes you feel good, right? Food is, very much tied to, like, emotions as well.
For sure.
Mhm.
That's what the comfort food is,
Uh-huh.
like, making you feel
Exactly, right?
good.
You're feeling good. That serotonin's high.
But, there's 2 types of well, when you think of comfort food, it's like pizza, ice cream, cakes, and things like that make you feel good. But then there's the maybe that's just not comfort food, but there's the energy foods, the healthy foods that actually make you feel good. Because I've actually been trying to cut back on certain things lately,
Yeah.
like meats and stuff, because I love meat. But I
Uh-huh.
found that literally when I eat chicken and beef and those heavy meats, I just feel so drained. Well, the itis, right? You feel
Uh-huh.
tired and you
Yep.
feel drained. And over the weekend, it just didn't work out where I had, like, 3 full meals, so I had, like, less meals, and I also ate more vegetables and fruits and things. I just felt so
You feel better,
energetic.
right? Mhm.
It was
Yeah.
weird because 'cause I'm like, "I ate less."
Yeah, so when I have patients kinda alluding to that, when I have patients that say, "You know what, Doctor Sams, I wanna do just like a gut, reboot, reset," I
Mhm.
usually say, "Okay, think about it in like a 3-week span," and it
Okay.
kinda incorporates what you're saying. So week 1, I usually say, like, "Let's do like a clean start." So cutting back, like, as you've acknowledged, on those, like, added sugars, ultra processed foods,
There it is.
right? Drinking your water is gonna be important. And then add 1, like, fermented, like, food per day, so your, like, sauerkrauts and things like that, your kefir, right?
Gotcha.
And then also eating, like, 2 at least 2 servings of, like, vegetables at each meal, okay?
Yeah.
And then doing some walking. Right? At least 10 minutes, 5 to
Exercise.
10 minutes, right? Walking. You don't have to do anything strenuous, right? Just at least doing like a 10-minute walk or some gentle yoga, any of those things, right? And so if you do that for 1 week, and then on the second week, you wanna like build from that base, right? So now you're gonna wanna do something that's gonna be some good prebiotic foods, right? So we talked about probiotics,
Mm.
and that's the bacteria itself,
Okay.
right?
Mhm.
But we're gonna talk about prebiotic foods, meaning the foods that help you fuel and feed the bacteria. So things like
Gotcha.
onion, garlic, bananas, oats, things like that in particular. Like start to include those into your daily meals because again, you're wanting to make the good bacteria happy. So we got to feed them too. Right. And then adding some fiber rich foods. So you're thinking about some lentils, greens, some chia seeds, things like that.
Okay.
And then alluding, because this is what made me think about, the 3-week gut reboot that I talk about is
Yeah.
because you talked about decreasing meat. So
Right.
on week 2, I try to tell them if they can try to do like a meatless Monday,
Mhm.
and like decreasing, right? And at least just taking 1 day of the week out. And then again, I always talk about mindfulness. I love mindfulness. I love some good breathing exercises,
Mhm.
right? And all of those things. And again, 5 to 10 minutes a day, right? And that's going to lower your gut stress. That's going to also decrease that cortisol. And then like week 3, diversifying. So, these are my patients who are like, or at least their families are overzealous and they're like, I got this. And I'm like, well, can you eat like 20 different plants this week? You know? I mean,
Oh my
you know,
god.
or at least
You can
introduce
always
a new
increase it. That
right? At
helps.
least, introduce a new fruit or veggie, and then you wanna add the good probiotic, because we were talking about the prebiotic, so we wanna get everything happy, then we can kinda put some new bacteria, new good, gut bacteria into this, like, happy environment.
Mhm.
It's gonna be important, and then sleep.
Of
Sleep is
course.
super important
All
because
the
why?
things.
Sleep, we talked about cortisol, right? And cortisol
Yeah.
your GI tract. So it's all interconnected. So I always am asking my patients and parents about what sleep looks like for them. And then for my adult patients, right, you're wanting to limit your alcohol, your caffeine, and another one,
Of course.
NSAIDs. I'm always
You
asking
say your
about.
adult patients for your
Yeah,
peds
well, I'm
and
saying for
teens.
adult patients, thinking about alcohol, because I don't have to talk about alcohol really as much in some teens,
Maybe the kids that
but
come to
not as
me are drinking
much.
alcohol.
In some teens, but, and it's usually they shouldn't be doing it, you know what
I
I mean? But
know.
so I don't really have to touch as
Have some
much on
patience.
it, like,
Yeah.
but in an adult world, like, I think that they should also limit your
Right.
alcohol and stuff as well.
Oh, you'd be surprised, you'd be surprised.
Uh-huh.
So, question about colon cleanses, because, my husband and I did that, a year ago when we first started our diet, and it just felt like this fresh start, like, "Oh, our body's empty, now we can, like, eat good," and things like that, and then previously, a year prior to that, I remember when I had a GI bug and I was sick, and it was like an easy way to, "Well, I haven't eaten in a couple of days. Let me start eating healthy now." But anyway, going back to
Uh-huh.
the colon cleanses, what do you think about those?
So I think, again, for me, right? Because I am a proceduralist, right? So I do endoscopies, and those are, you got to be really careful. So in terms of the idea behind it, I think it's nice, right? In terms of like kind of resetting, and so doing if you're wanting like a quicker fix as opposed to kind of doing this week's worth of changes with your microbiome. But I think then also just how are you getting this? And so are we just drinking things to kinda do kind of a cleanse, right? A nice gentle cleanse? Or are we going to these
Oh,
places where they're trying to do, colon cleanses
I mean
in
an
that
actual
way?
place. I forget about
Uh-huh.
the cleanses you can do on your own, duh, of
Yeah,
course.
like a natural way. So I'm gonna
I
be
mean
more
when they
towards
put the
that.
holes up you.
I know that's what you mean, but I'm saying for those, right, there's, like, dangers associated with it, right?
I
Especially if
know,
they
right?
do, like, the colonic irrigations or the enemas, right? And so with those, you got a lot of risk, right? So,
Mhm.
bowel perforation, right, is
Ugh,
always a concern,
yeah.
right? So if
I
you
knew it.
tear things.
I was afraid because I was
Dehydration,
cramping.
right?
Mm-mm.
Dehydration and electrolyte imbalances, right? That's
Mhm.
another big one, right? Because, again, you have a large amount of fluids that's in your body, right? And particularly if you're now gonna be
Interesting.
cleansing things and pulling things out, they're gonna be fluid shifts. And
Mhm.
so, like, who is doing this and how are they monitoring these things, right? Infection, right? Well, how are they using, like, it's a non-sterile environment, but I don't need somebody else's poop being introduced into
You
my,
said
my
no.
colon, right? So, like, what equipment, right? Are they using sterile equipment?
Mhm.
Things like that. And then also, why are we doing the colon cleanse? Oftentimes, right? And I have seen it where patients think that that is going to be the treatment for the problem and they have something else that's underlying, right? So a
Exactly.
colon cleanse is not going to just go and cure your, inflammatory bowel disease. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
I would still say that you need to have followed up with your doctor or specialist that's going to kind of do your baseline workup to ensure that you don't have something else going on that's
Mhm.
causing the symptoms you have. But from a
Yeah.
general aspect behind it, I think it's always great to do, like, a nice gut reset,
Okay.
but
Gut
in a
reset.
safe way. So that's why it makes it a little hard when saying to go in and get
Yeah,
the
because you don't know where they're
procedures.
going.
That's all
Makes
the
sense.
hard part.
Okay, all right. Well, let's go back for a second here because
Yeah.
our good friend Melanie, she's a "Coffee? No, no, yikes."
Yikes.
So let's spend a little bit more time on that because I think the majority of us drink coffee. I mean, I happen to be the one that I'll drink it here and there from Starbucks, but it's the dessert. So I get the caramel ribbon crunch. I always ask for extra caramel, extra crunch. So it's all about dessert and sugar for me. But then there's the adults who they have to have a cup of coffee in the morning, at lunch. My husband has to go out at 9 p.m. and drink it. Not even for sleep. I mean, it doesn't affect his
Yeah.
sleep. He goes to sleep. So anyway, what's the deal with coffee?
So, yeah, so when we're saying in terms of coffee, not completely removing it, we're just talking about limiting it, right? And so oftentimes coffee, as you know, it can have a laxative effect, right? So we're thinking about that, right? Because
Yeah,
with coffee, with the
yeah.
caffeine, it actually stimulates your CNS, so your central, which works
Of
opposite, right?
course.
When I think of the CNS, we're thinking about, your rest and digest, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, where your CNS is your fight or flight, and your
Mhm.
ENS is your rest and digest. So they're working on different, right? 'Cause we have 2 brains here, so we're talking about that. So if you're now activating and stimulating your
Uh,
CNS, right, that's here, then you're gonna have, right, some effects also on your gastrointestinal
yeah.
as
Yeah.
well,
Uh-huh,
right?
uh.
So you're again, 2 brains. Coffee is stimulating, it helps you focus, keeps you awake, but it's gonna do the same with your GI tract. It increases what we call
Wow.
peristalsis, so that movement, right?
Yeah.
That wave-like movement. It
Yeah.
also will stimulate the release of more gastric acid, right?
Mhm.
So for my patients with
Excellent.
reflux, it's gonna make the
Oh,
reflux
yeah.
worsen,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Definitely
It's
does that.
going to also, like, if we're kinda talking about our extension of our GI tract, right? The secretion of bile, right? And so bile is important, because it helps break down or emulsify fats within your GI tract. So now you're getting more of that. So a lot of patients will get diarrhea and things like that from there. The other thing that can
Yeah.
happen where you're talking about, like, pain and things like that, it can stimulate, specific hormones within your GI tract, coffee does, the caffeine portion of
Mm.
it, like gastrin, there's CCK, and the CCK again, gastric colic. So, again, all of this kinda, like, cramping, filling, things like that, that you can kinda, feel. So that's kind of one of the things that you when you think about it, and so if you're having a
Yeah.
digestive issue already and then you're adding caffeine to the mix, then you can overall exacerbate like existing digestive issues. And that's what's going to
Yeah.
worsen or trigger more discomfort for you. So that's usually. And then on the flip side, because we're talking about the brain gut connection, right? You got the trigger of like anxiety or jitters, right? And
Mhm.
so and
Mhm.
some people you drink coffee, you can feel it, right? You feel it all over. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of the same thing as well.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, it goes without saying that there's just watching what you put in your body,
Uh-huh.
especially extra chemicals that are gonna, directly affect our brain and how we think and things like that, but hearing, like, the details of how it affects our digestion and our microbiome, this is just really, like, eye-opening for a lot of us because, we're told by our docs, like, "Oh, you gotta eat this, don't eat this, don't drink that," but not a lot of us understand the details of why.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
this is great. So what are some everyday habits? And you've obviously talked about some things like what to stay away from. But what are some everyday habits, good or bad, that can either strengthen or harm our gut health?
Yeah, so I would say let's see. I'm gonna do on the positive note first. So we'll talk about some good things,
Good
right?
thing.
Because I feel like I don't want to scare everybody and then be like, oh my gosh, everything I'm eating is all bad. So I would say helpful things, right? We talked about eating a wide variety of plants. Everyone always comes in and parents are always asking, like, what can I just give them? Just eat right. Right. So it starts about what you're putting
Yeah,
in. When I have any new patient that comes into my office, I always start from what are we putting in our body?
yeah,
Because that's usually, right, the start of kinda where we're at, right, what are kinda starting the symptoms. So again, if you can truly aim, like, if you're like, "If I had to choose, aim for at least 20 different fruits and veggies, grains and legumes, like, in a week. It's kinda where, if you wanted to
winning.
start like, your plate should just be full of all these fruits and veggies, right?
Wow.
And adding, like I was telling you, trying to do at least one fermented, food a day.
Mhm.
So, like, your yogurts, your kimchi, things like that. And then a lot of good regular movement and exercise, right? Because 'Cause you're
Yeah,
moving. You're moving things, you're moving your bowels, all of
yeah.
this. And then good sleep, stress management would be those main things, right? So then harmful. Right, the bad part. I would say high sugar, ultra processed foods, right? The things that's good. Much
The
alcohol,
things
right?
that
We talked
taste
about that.
good.
And then
Exactly.
the unnecessary antibiotic use. This is a big one, again, for my
Mm.
pediatric patients because, you know,
Mhm.
parents are so used to like, "Hey, I go there, my child has a cough, a runny nose, ear infection, right? I need some antibiotics for that." And, right, we're so used to that, we need antibiotics for that. And so we don't think about the
Yeah.
detriment and the horrors that's causing in your belly because of these
Mhm.
antibiotics,
For
right?
sure.
And so that's one of the big things. So limiting, if you can, antibiotic use, is one of the big things that I kinda start out with them. And then,
Yeah.
obviously if you're having chronic stress, right? So understanding what your environment, figuring out ways to de-stress. One of the things that you can do are breathing exercises, right? If you do nothing else, taking some deep breaths and doing some breathing exercises, whether that's your box breathing, right? Breathing
Mhm.
in, really, holding in there, or diaphragmatic breathing. And so
Oh,
I
and explain what that is.
diaphragmatic
Yeah.
breathing, right, where you're, like, pushing in and holding and pulling out, and you're moving your diaphragm along with your breath. And so there's a lot of different videos and things people can go and look look up in terms of how to like practice those. But I always explain like diaphragmatic breathing is not just something like, oh, there's just talking about breathing again. Like the US government trains the Navy SEALs to do diaphragmatic breathing. So when they're out in like battle, combat and they get injured,
Ah.
like that helps to decrease those pain receptors
Mhm.
significantly. So I'm just like, if the US Navy SEALs can do this, right? They're like the top, right?
Exactly.
Then, we should do these
Mm.
things and it works. So I always explain that. So
Ah.
doing some of those things, um, is helpful to decrease stress and then also to kind of decrease pain receptors of stress using a TENS unit. So your TENS unit, you think about those they put on there, you see the little muscles and it makes your muscles twitch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
actually can put that on your belly too. And it helps to decrease some of that sensory overload and kind of help calm things down as well. So definitely figuring out what are some stressors and where are we getting stressors from, and then sleep. I always talk about sleep
Sleep,
is
sleep,
important.
sleep.
Sleep, 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 sleep.
I
Make
I
sure
I
you're
don't think you
sleeping.
told us to sleep. Get sleep
Sleep,
yet.
sleep. Yeah.
Oh, it's so important. I mean, we're always talking about this, but I mean, it affects everything, just to have a healthy lifestyle. So
Yeah.
someone's listening, they have a sedentary lifestyle, they're eating pizza and soda just as they're watching this podcast right now, and they have some cramping. I mean, of course, they probably should go see you. But if they immediately did some of these changes, how long does it take to stabilize or balance their microbiome?
Yeah, so I would say at least at minimum, I would say 4 weeks, because essentially when we're looking at even from like okay, I'm gonna go and buy these like, Visbiome today. Again, I'm not sponsored by Visbiome whatsoever. I just really like them. But
I
like
want
if they
some.
decided, hey, I want to go with this, today, it usually takes about at least 4 weeks or so. Also if they're on any antibiotics. So first you're wanting to make sure you're stopping from that. And then also another role is antacids. So how much of antacids are they taking? And if it's something that they should still be taking, sometimes we'll get started on medications and we just take it just because.
Mhm.
And so we have to think about those
Yeah.
antacid medications and how they disrupt your microbiome because they alter your stomach acid. And so your bacteria and your gut microbiome are at optimal pHs. And so when we start to alter those, we can see that. So I would say first identify what you're on and how that's causing a disruption. And if there's things
Mm.
you can or can't peel away, right? If there's some things that you're on that's important, right, and you need it, then I'm not gonna tell you to stop that. You know what I mean? Like you need
Yeah, of
to take that.
course, you need it.
But if there aren't things or if there are things that you're doing that you don't need, then kind of taking a moment to figure that out first, I think is
Mhm.
important. And then from there, you can repopulate, like I said, your gut flora with some, probiotics. And we talked about prebiotics, right? So you want to feed the bacteria good things as
Yeah.
well.
So they can be happy.
And, within like I would say the first like 4 weeks or so, you might start to see a change, but when I have patients kinda, restarting things, I usually, like, have them do it for at least 6 to 8 weeks, and the reason for that is, like, people forget to take stuff, they don't do it, they miss it a couple days in here and there, so if I tell them 6 to 8 weeks, I might get a good 4 weeks out of them,
Yeah, yeah, tell them something longer.
Uh-huh,
So we have a
uh-huh.
question from the audience. What about eating for your blood type?
Yes, so I have, I get, patients ask me that all the time. So there is limited research, that basically will say yes or no to that. So, how some I've read, or I've heard, right, oh, people with O blood type needs to have more like protein. They need more meats. They need all of those things in their diet versus not. Again, there's a lot of limited kind of studies out. And I would probably defer more to my, hematologist in terms of like how that makes a big difference in
Yeah.
what your markers of your blood type and what that looks like. But from the studies and from like a lot of anecdotal evidence, where patients will come out and they'll have their testimonials that eating certain things may be more important, right? So we're talking about like our A blood
Wow.
type. They say they should just eat mostly fruits and vegetables. And so, and then our O's, like you got to make sure you're
Oh,
getting some steak in there throughout the day.
really?
You know
I
what I
think
mean?
I'm
And
a
so I've definitely seen a lot of literature, like I said, on it, but like research behind it, I haven't seen as much
yeah.
research behind the literature. Does that make sense? Like it's
It
talk
makes
everyone's
sense.
talking about it.
Yeah.
And so I definitely know the differences between what, those suggestions are. And so when I
Yeah.
have parents ask that, I mean, you can try it and see how you feel. Like that's what I say. It's not
Yeah,
gonna hurt.
you
Like you're not
sound like
hurting.
me. me when my patients ask about diets and how it's going to affect ADHD and things like that. I'm like, you could try it,
Uh-huh.
because like you don't always know all the research when parents come and ask you questions.
Uh-huh.
But
Uh-huh.
that is interesting about the blood types. I've never even thought of that. Wow.
Yep, yep, yep. It's
I don't
definitely a
even know if I
thing. So
remember
whoever
my
asks
own.
that, thinks. But yeah, I
Yeah.
get that as well, people asking.
Great question, Melanie. Okay. Well, this has been great. I told you we get to the 40-minute mark quick. Look at
Hey,
that.
we did. Look at there. Look at
Oh my
there.
goodness. Well, yeah, I try to limit it so we don't go too long so people, can get to keep watching. But anyhow, my last question that I always ask all my guests is tell us about your personal journey to joy and how that's been
Oh,
going.
so let me think about this. Let me get it together.
Yes.
So I feel like, let's see, if I had to describe it, that I'm walking through a season where I would say joy isn't something that I'm stumbling upon. Like,
Mhm.
I feel like I'm being really intentional about it.
Everyone
Right.
says
So it's
that.
something like I'm actively cultivating, right? And I'm allowing like the universe to align these moments, these people and opportunities to like help me see the beauty in my own life. And so in terms of like my own life, right? So I'm a mom, I have 3 children, right? I'm a wife, I'm a
She's a wife, mom, boss.
yes, exactly. I'm a daughter, I'm a sister to my brother, and to my sisters. And so like, I'm all the things to everyone, right? And family members.
There it
And so
is.
I think like in the rhythms of like my family life, I am learning to find joy in those moments. So right, like the laughter, the noise, right? The quiet in between moments, right? I'm finding that like joy doesn't need to come from like big events.
That's
Right.
good.
And so it's from like those like shared meals that I'm having with my babies or the silly conversations, right? Or
Yeah.
and like the safety of like love that surrounds me, right? Because I've went to trainings all from different states and all over. And so I'm finally back home around all these beautiful people that I love and that loves me back. And so in loving myself as well, I'm realizing that I don't have to wait for everything to be perfect. Right. And that I can feel
It's
joy
never gonna be
even
perfect,
now.
so yeah.
And so, like, I'm learning, like, my joy overall, right, is uniquely mine, right? And so, sometimes it's messy, sometimes it's magical, right? And so, it's just,
Yeah,
like, unfolding
fair.
in ways that remind me, like, I'm connected to something bigger than myself, but, like, with every step, though, I'm not just, like, chasing joy, like, I'm truly becoming it, like, right, within
Ooh,
myself.
I love it. That's why I like asking that question with everyone because it's everyone has similar answers, and, the uniting theme is, like, being intentional, right?
Yeah,
It takes work, so everything we talked about today, it takes work. It's probably gonna be hard to change your diet and change your lifestyle and try to figure out how to get some good sleep, but
uh-huh,
it you gotta do it, and you have to stay consistent and disciplined, and that's how you will find your joy and keep it.
yes, yes,
So
yes,
that's
yes.
important. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You made it. And don't forget, everyone, the Enjoino, which talks about how to balance your mental, physical, financial, aspirational, and social health. And we talked a lot of things that Dr. Sam's talked about tonight. You can that through the Enjoino and help with your daily life and mental wellness. That's on my website, DrEnjoyLife.com for $35, and then Inspire Joy for the Wife Mom Boss as well for $17.49 on my website, DrEnjoyLife.com. So, and you can get the Joy Bundle for $45.
Look at there, go get it.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for watching. This has been great, and thank you for the comments. This has been an Enjoy Life production. If you're in a crisis, don't hesitate. Call, text, or chat 988 for immediate support. Please note, this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional treatment. If you're looking for therapy or medication management through Enjoy Life, visit www.DrEnjoyLife.com to request a consultation. I'm licensed in 12 states. I accept Aetna in Georgia, Florida, and Virginia. Be sure to grab your copy of the Enjoino to help you on your wellness journey. Also, check out Inspire Joy for the Wife Mom Boss to help you balance it all without losing yourself. Better yet, get the full Joy Bundle for just $45. Remember, Journey to Joy Live is every Thursday at 7 p.m. Thank you for joining me, and until next time, may you continue to transform stress into joy.